I'll tell you a story. And you may not. Do you know who you probably? I'm gonna tell you, and you see if you know the person. Bob served 27 years as an NFL official. He was a white hat, the head referee, and he did Super Bowls in 3 different decades, the only one to ever do that. And when he retired, he was a senior official in NFL. So Bob said, my only job was to watch the quarterback after the play started. He said, I never knew whether it was a touchdown or completed pass or first down or anything. I just watched the quarterback. That was my job. But before the play started, I had several things I had to do. I had to check the play clock, the game clock, the formation, the substitutions, and a couple other things. He said, he said, when I was in Chicago, I had one other thing I had to do. I had to reach around in my back pocket and see if my penalty flag was there. If it was not there, he said, I'd go to the huddle. I'd stand behind number 34 and I'd say, Walter, give me my flag back. And Walter Payton would put it out of his shirt and give it to him. He'd put it back in his pocket and he'd go start to play.
Welcome to Project Candor, the podcast where we explore the extraordinary stories hidden inside ordinary lives. I'm your host, Jeanne Anderson, your Admiral of the Unexpected. Today we are setting sail with someone who has lived not one life, but many, including a sailor's life, and found extraordinary stories at every port. Jim Paulk has lived at least 5 lives in one. Naval Academy graduate, submarine officer, corporate executive, marine conservationist, and at 91, a published author. Jim grew up in Brunswick, Georgia, graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 1957, and spent a decade in the Navy before a 26-year career at Procter Gamble. But the chapter that surprised even him came later, 9 years fighting to protect the Pacific Ocean, in a book called Shaking Up the World. That's where we begin today. Jim, I'm really happy you decided to join our little ship, Project Candor, and take a journey with us.
I am happy to be here. I always enjoy it.
Great. Are you ready for a bunch of questions?
Shoot.
Okay. So I want to start at the very beginning because I think the beginning tells us everything. You grew up in a small Georgia town, attended a military prep school, and ended up at the Naval Academy. That's not an obvious path for most kids. So looking back at that young man from Brunswick, Georgia, what was the first moment you sensed that your life was going to go somewhere unexpected?
Well, I wasn't sure. I was probably like a lot of us. We were just having fun and doing a lot of hunting and fishing, and I had a girlfriend and just enjoying life and enjoying being a teenager. And then the biggest thing was being able to drive a car, being 16 years old and getting a driver's license. And at least with the older kids got a driver's license and they could drive, and then we just ride with them. But that was probably the biggest transition, was being able to get in a car and have freedom and go in the woods and run around and go to different towns and do whatever we wanted to. But that was it. But the time, being born in 1933 was the depths of the Great Depression, and the world was changing at that time. Hitler was coming into power in Germany, and we had so much poverty in the United States. People would come to your back door and say, "May I please have a piece of bread?" Mm-hmm. And I don't think people today understand what it was like back then. It was really, really bad and tough times, and money was hard to come by, and most of us worked when we were kids. I had so many different jobs as a child, but we needed to spend our money, so we had to work for it.
Nice. Well, I don't think people do get get it. And that's why I like you talking about it, because we want to preserve history. We want people to think about this and not try to rewrite it, because the bad times were the bad times.
They were.
Yeah.
They were. But we survived, and people worked together and helped one another. That was the main thing. And then I'll tell you, before World War II, the average person made about $20 or $25 a week. Think
Yeah.
about that. And then when we had a shipyard in Brunswick to build Liberty ships, people were making $100 a week. So they were making 4 or 5 times as much as they'd made before the war. And they came to Brunswick from all over the South to work in the shipyard and build Liberty ships. And that changed the town. We didn't have enough houses. They built little 1-bedroom things on every vacant lot in town, and people were renting out bedrooms, and people were driving from many miles, and some people were simply sleeping in the cars. So it was a really very, very different time, and our schools were overcrowded, of course, and we went on two phases every day, and where one part of the alphabet was in the morning and the other part was in the afternoon. So if the kids you played with were in school, you didn't have anybody to play with. And then the second half of the year you switched. So your friends were gone until the weekend. So those were some of the things that we experienced. And so I wasn't sure what I wanted to do as a teenager. I thought for a while I might go into the ministry. And then I thought maybe I'd like to be a professional golfer. And I worked at those. And then I decided that I really wanted to go to the Naval Academy. And that became my overriding dream, was to go to Annapolis. But I was fortunate that I did not get in out of high school, because I don't think I would have made it. I was not mature enough, and I don't think I was prepared well enough academically to get through the program at the academy. The academy goes a bang, bang, bang. It throws stuff at you so fast. But going to a military college in Dahlonega, it was a 4-year college, but I went there for a year, and I thought I'd get into Annapolis, but I did not get an appointment. Then after the second year there, and I had gone through differential equations. I only lacked 2 courses to having a major in math, but that was a big thing for me, was getting that math background. But I did not get an appointment, and so at the end of the 2 years, I said, well, I guess I'm going to go to Georgia Tech and get an engineering degree like a lot of my friends. And I was playing in a golf tournament somewhere in Georgia. I don't remember where, but a friend from mine from another city that had become friends playing golf in different around the state came running out of the course. Jimmy, your mother called. She wants you to call home. She wants you to get home immediately. And I said, well, I'm not walking off the golf course in the middle of a match. I'll call her when I get done. And so I finished up and I called her, and she said, you have an appointment to Annapolis. And I almost melted to that point. I could not believe it, because I thought I was not going to get it. But I got in. So I had to get home, because we had to get down to Jacksonville and get all the exams done, and then get to Annapolis in a week. So it was kind of run before I got in. And it was unbelievable getting there. And the first night at the academy, there were 1,168 of us, and everyone was running around. Where are you from? What do you do? And that sort of thing. And there were people from all 48 states, only 48 then, and 6 foreign nations. And it seemed like everyone I talked to said they had graduated valedictorian into the class, they were president of the class, and they were captain of the football team. And I'm thinking, I was none of those things. What am I doing here? But I was so in awe of them. And then after all these years, I'm more in awe of them today, because I can look back at all the things, unbelievable things that they have accomplished in life. And it's just been overwhelming for me to go through all of this. And and enjoy it. I've had such a great life. I really have.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. So you navigated at least three distinct chapters in your life: military service, corporate career, and marine conservation.
Yeah.
Was there a specific moment when you understood your life wasn't going to stay on one course? And how did you learn to lean
Well,
into that rather than
what
fight it?
what I learned, Jeanne, was that, and I think it's probably like this for everyone. I think life is an evolutionary process,
Hmm.
and I think that you just it's like Yogi Berra said, you come to a fork in the road and you take it, and there are a lot of decisions. And I tell my grandchildren, I said, you're going to make a lot of decisions, and some of them are going to be right, some are going to be wrong, but you want to make more right ones than wrong ones, and so you just go through one at a time, and you try and do your best at every stage. You do just be the best that you can be, and so when I graduated from Annapolis. I got married the next day after graduation, and we could talk about that if you wanted to later. But and then I went into the Navy, and I'm in a submarine force, and I served on 5 years on active duty, and then 5 years in reserves. And being engineering officer on a submarine was one of the best jobs I ever had, because about half the crew reports to the chief engineer, and I had the most fabulous people working for me. They're all very smart, very talented, and very motivated, and it's a great group of people to work with. And here it is, all these years later, and I'm still in communication with some of the enlisted men. Most of the officers and the chief petty officers have passed away, but
Mm.
there's some of them that are still around, and we still communicate with one another, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. If you were in the engineering room in a sub, did you have any hearing loss as a result? I know that is something
Yeah,
back then there wasn't a lot of good protection.
that's probably right. I think that I was exposed to a lot of noises over my career, and that's why I have hearing aids today. So that's a very astute observation. But the engine rooms are very noisy. But once
Yes.
you dive and you shut the engines down and you go on the batteries, it's very quiet and it's very still. And when you're deep, you don't have the motion of that you have on the surface. So
You don't have the
it's
currents hitting you, I guess.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
didn't know you went. What's electric in the submarine? That part I don't know.
What's it like?
What's the electric? You said when you dive, then
You go
you
on the
shut
battery.
down.
You have
You
you
go.
have you have batteries. You have two batteries with 126 cells in each one. Each cell weighs a ton. So you got
Mm.
26 tons of battery, and forward battery and the after battery, and so that will keep you going at maybe 3 or 4 knots for a day or two. So if you try to go real fast, you're going to use up the power in your battery. So
But it
you
still allows you to steer, so you're not just sinking.
oh no you
Yeah.
and that's right.
I thought when you turned off the screws that, it would just sink, but
Well, you can actually maintain control just by pumping water in and out, and we
mm,
we did that a lot in some of our drills. That we shut everything down, and we would spend 4 hours just uh, trying to maintain a certain depth, not change the depth, but stay at that depth. And if people walk back and forth and they move forward, then you're gonna have to pump water to keep it balanced and
oh,
and uh,
wow.
and whatever. And but you could maintain, but because the weight changed all the time, because if you were running you were running making fresh water all the time. You had to make a lot of fresh water, not for
Mm,
showers and washing your hands, but water for the batteries. So we made a
okay.
lot of water, and so uh, you're taking salt water out and making fresh water out of it, and so that changes the weight in the boat, and so
Mm. And
You're
you're right.
constant.
Everybody can't go to the
Well,
to the front of the sub.
well, and people did that as a joke.
Oh no.
If there was a certain officer that they didn't particularly like, they said, "Let's all go forward." They would all go forward and change the way. They didn't get paid to compensate for it, and then they'd all go back somewhere else.
Oh
It
no.
was kind of a joke, but it was
Yeah,
kind of
you know, they
fun.
used to do that on airlines too. Like they'd start moving people's seats, like, oh, we have to distribute weight better. I don't know if they still do it, but we have to distribute the weight. So these three people need to move back to the back. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
I don't know. I couldn't imagine being underwater and just, with the door, the hatch closed and, there's no sun, there's no. I don't know. Is there just any? I mean, it's just the sub's lights, right? You don't see any light in the ocean itself when you're
No,
down.
no, there's no windows.
Oh, you have to be some special person to be able to do that. I actually dated a submariner, but my questions don't come from knowing him. But it's just interesting to think about being there. When I was stationed in Hawaii, they have that one submarine, and I can't think of the name of it now. It's on display, and it's a tourism place now, so you can go in and walk in it. And that is one teeny weeny little place.
I remember watching that out of a window of the hotel there, and they would take people out. They would take maybe a dozen people or so, and then they'd go down, and they could actually see, and they'd take them out to show them a plane that was on the bottom or something that was on the bottom. They could and show them the fish and everything. But that was I remember that. That was interesting.
Oh yeah, they do have those tour boats
Yeah.
that do that. I did go on one of those, and I didn't really like it too much. It was claustrophobic for me. But I think it was called the Bowfin. Now that I'm thinking about it, there's a boat, the actual sub from like the World War II time frame. The Bowfins now, you can walk in it like it's a museum,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's the whole full sub. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's keep moving here. We
All
got to
right.
keep sailing around.
All
So,
right.
marine conservation is rarely smooth sailing. So, when you were in the fight to eliminate destructive gillnets from California waters, what was the hardest stretch of that campaign, and what
Well,
kept you from turning back?
I worked for 26 years for Procter Gamble and retired. And after I retired, I decided that I was too young to do nothing, and I got a group of people together, retirees, and said, "Why don't we do some projects together? Not for money, but we'll get some money, but it's mostly for fun. They're doing it together." And so
Hmm.
we were about a year and a half into that, and I had got some projects. We'd completed some things and having a really good time. And then a group came to me and said, uh, they've got this gillnet initiative that they've started, and Doris Allen was assemblywoman, and she was sponsoring it. And I didn't know anything about the gillnet program, and but they apparently had tried to get that on the ballot twice, and it failed. And
Hmm.
so they were in the third time, and they were a month into it. And the guys had been going to some of the meetings, and they said it's not working. And so they went to Doris Allen, and they said, "We're going to fail. It is not going to work. We got to get somebody to lead us and take charge, and somebody that knows the fishing community. And we want to get Jim Paulk in here to run this program." And so the guy that was running it was actually an editor of a fishing magazine, and so anyway, I went back and talked to a group I'd been meeting with. And I said, "Look, I've been asked to take over this initiative," and I said, "But there's absolutely no way I can do this. I need a committee, and you guys, if you guys will agree to put your lives on hold for the next 5 months, and I'll do the same thing, then we will bust our rear ends and we will get this thing on the ballot and get it passed." So they said yes. And I went back and said, "Okay, we're organized, we're going." And I told the group, I said, "We have to create the perception of success." I said, we have to be everywhere, all over the state of California. And if we create perception of success, then we can get people to donate money to pay for ballots, pay for the signatures. We'll get some, and we ended up getting 100,000 as volunteers, which we were told the most ever gotten in a initiative campaign. And anyway, we by June, we thought we were ready and had enough ballots, but we weren't sure because they have to be validated. If somebody signed more than once, then they would get thrown out. If they didn't sign it exactly the way they were registered as a voter, it got thrown out. If they were not registered to vote, it got thrown out. So we weren't sure whether we had enough to cover the ones that were invalidated. So at the end of the campaign, I asked a friend that had a mortuary, and I knew they had a King Air airplane, a twin-engine plane that would carry about 8 or 9. I said, we need a fast airplane to cover the state of California in one day. And I said, will you be willing to donate your plane? And he said he would, and his brother said he'd be the co-pilot. And so we left Orange County Airport, which is south of Los Angeles, in the dark, and we flew to Sacramento. And we put on a dog and pony show, I call it, in the governor's media room, which was like a small auditorium, and it was full of people. All media, television, radio, and everything was there. And so, and we got through with that. We got back on the plane and flew down to Burbank, and with the media facilities were there. And we had a lot of television stars and VIPs that showed up there, of course, being near LA. And we must have had 20 people standing up for us. And we did another dog and pony show there, and then got back on the plane and flew to San Diego. And when we got down there, the guys had organized a convoy of fork trucks with pallets of ballots. So they went down the road with those fork trucks and the ballots and put them on the steps of the courthouse. And we went up by the pallets and did a dog and pony show. Got through, got on the plane, flew back to Orange County, and got there in dark. So from dark to dark, we covered the state and put on the shows and I think got people convinced that we could get this thing passed. So about a month later, we found out we had qualified and we would be on the ballot in November. And so the night of the election, Bill Ray, who owned the Balboa Bay Club in Newport Beach, made his facility available to us. And I think Mickey Mantle was there, Joey Bishop was there, a lot of celebrities were there. And about every half hour, I'd get up and make an announcement, tell them what the vote was. And by the end of the evening, we had won 53-47, which was a huge victory.
Great.
And that was probably the most, I don't know what you call it, but there's no way we could have done what we did, but we did. It was amazing. But we had people all over California working. Everybody was donating facilities, making things available to us and cooperating. But over the next 3 years, we phased out the gillnets and made a lot of other programs available. And when the gillnets were gone, one of the major fisheries in Southern California is white sea bass, which is a member of the croaker family. And they're sizable fish, 30, 40 pounds. So they're good sized fish and fun to catch. And so SeaWorld had started experimenting with raising these white sea bass to about 3 or 4 inches. But when they put them in the ocean, it was like feeding the ocean ice cream because everything ate them. So we came up with the concept of having grow out pens. And so we established these that were going to be operated by fishing clubs at their expense. And they had built these pens that would fit in a boat slip. And if you visualize just a pen underwater, and SeaWorld would bring these fish to us at 4 inches, and we would feed them and get them up to 10 to 12 inches to release in the ocean. And the survival rate would go from maybe 4 or 5% to maybe 75, 80%. And this program is still going on today. And it's one of the best things we ever did, because now 40% of the fish, of the white sea bass that are caught in Southern California, have a tag in them. And they were a product of this program that we started. So it's
right.
ongoing. It's working real good. And
I have to ask you a question. And I don't
Okay,
mean to
sure.
interrupt you, but when you're talking and you said gillnets, I don't even know what that is. Can you
Okay, a
explain
gillnet.
that?
Okay, picture like a tennis net. Okay,
Hmm.
okay, and the fish would swim into the net and get caught. The gills would get caught in that net, and they couldn't get loose. So the fish are
Okay.
trapped in the net by their gills. The gills would get caught in there, and they couldn't get out.
Oh, right. Okay.
Okay, now what happens when they get caught in there? What do you think eats them? Sharks eat them. Seals eat them. Everything wants to eat them, and those things get tangled up in the nets too. So you kill a lot of what I call bycatch, things that you don't want to catch end up getting caught and destroyed because of the nature of the fishery. It's not a selective kind of a fishery, like you catch
Hmm.
them one at a time in a line or whatever. Even if you wrap a school of fish in a big net like the tuna boats do, and they wrap them around and then pull the seine and they pull them up, and they've got a whole school of fish. That way, they mostly catch tuna, but sometimes they get porpoise in there, and they have to find a way to get the porpoise out that are feeding on the tuna. But
Now, who put the gillnets in there to begin with? You
well,
said fishermen.
it's a legitimate way. It's a legitimate way to fish, except that it's a destructive way of fishing too. It kills a lot of things you don't want to kill,
Mm.
and if you have an unbelievable amount of wildlife, then you don't worry about killing some you don't want to. But if it's limited, then you can't afford to kill a lot of things,
Yeah, no
and
kidding.
and so it's not a one of the best ways to fish, and they can do other ways of fishing, and but the gill nets were very destructive, and we kind of set the pattern, and we kind of told some other states how to do it, and I know we cooperated with Florida and the state of Washington, and got them to go through the gill net process too.
Oh,
So
that's great.
it
Well, you
was
said that kill things you don't want, or you kill too many of them. My husband's crazy over that lobster or whatever it is. No, yeah, crab, the crab fishing people,
yeah,
and
oh yeah,
they fish so much that our Alaskan king crab is
yeah,
costing
oh
a
yeah,
buck a claw, $100 a
yeah.
claw. So yeah, that's terrible when that happens, and now they have to repopulate if you don't want to take a species totally out.
Yeah. Well, we did some other things too. I mean, we wrote legislation for anglers, and we built artificial reefs. We built probably the largest artificial reef in the world, and we dumped a lot of concrete. We work with Department of Fish and Game and the Coastal Commission and Coast Guard and everyone to get material and take it out and dump it in a designated site. And I got so that I could. I did a lot of media events, and whenever I'd send something into the L.A. Times and they would publicize it, we would get all media that wanted to go, and we'd put them on boats and we'd take them out so they could watch, and then as we got more publicity, I had people call and saying, "We got material. Can you use it or whatever?" And it was very unusual. I had the uh, National Fisheries Service that called me one time, and he said, we've got all of this coral that's been confiscated, that was been imported illegally, because it was illegal to bring coral in." and said, "You're making a dump. Could we bring some of this out and dump it?" I said, "Well, how much do you have?" They said, "Well, maybe a dump truck load." And so when they came out and we did a presentation in Huntington Beach in a parking lot there with a lot of media, and these people, well, they showed up and they were in shorts, and their leg had all these cuts on their legs. I said, "What happened?" All this stuff was wrapped up in paper or something, and when they unwrapped it, it's very sharp. Carl is very sharp.
Oh, yeah.
So
I know that. I
was,
snorkeled in Hanama Bay, and they tell you when you're walking on the coral reef, do not put your leg into a hole, even by mistake, or try not to, because there's these eels there, right?
Yeah.
And they'll come and bite you. But I did slide into one and scrape my leg, and then it started growing because they're live. I mean, it's not a rock; it's like a live organism. So it started growing. I had to have antibiotics, and I almost got in trouble with the Navy because they're like, "Oh, you were out sunbathing, and now you're sick, and you can't come to work." I'm like, "No, I got stuck on coral. That's a different thing. I wasn't out partying." Oh, gosh. Well, let's go to another question because there's so much to ask you. Yours is full of good information. Your book, Shaking Up the World, brings together remarkable stories from people across different lives. As you gathered these stories, what did you discover about what it actually takes for a person's life to leave a lasting mark?
Well, let me put it this way. To get the story in the book, it had to be significant. Every story had to earn its way into the book. It couldn't just be something. It had to be something special. It had a little twist to it because this was not going to be a book of bios. I was born here, did this. That was not going to be this book. And this, as it turned out, this was the only book of its nature in the history of the Naval Academy since 1845. There've been a lot of movies and a lot of books written, but they were basically by one person about one person's life or about the academy in a movie or whatever. But this book has 59 authors and 81 stories, so it's very unique from that standpoint. And when I announced to the class that I plan to do this book, no one says, "Who the heck are you to do this book?" Everybody said, "What can we do to help?" It was amazing. And I got one of the first persons that called was Bob McElwee. And Bob called and said, "Jimmy, do you want some stories from the NFL?" I said, "Oh, I would love to have some." I said, "That would be a big hit in the book." And so I'll tell you a story. And you may not. Do you know who you probably? I'm going to tell you, and you see if you know the person.
Okay.
Bob served 27 years as an NFL official. He was a white hat, the head referee, and he did Super Bowls in 3 different decades. The only one to ever do that. And when he retired, he was a senior official in NFL. So Bob said, "My only job was to watch the quarterback after the play started." He said, "I never knew whether it was a touchdown or completed pass or first down or anything. I just watched the quarterback. That was my job. But before the play started, I had several things I had to do. I had to check the play clock, the game clock, the formation, the substitutions, and a couple other things." He said, he said, "When I was in Chicago, I had one other thing I had to do. I had to reach around in my back pocket and see if my penalty flag was there. If it was not there," he said, "I'd go to the huddle. I'd stand behind number 34, and I'd say, 'Walter, give me my flag back.' And Walter Payton would put it out of his shirt and give it to him. He'd put it back in his pocket, and he'd go start to play. And the people on the stands or on television never noticed that happening, but the guys in the huddle were all laughing. But
That's
Payton loved it. He loved to have fun on the field, and there are several stories in there about him and some other things that Bob I'll tell you another one. Do you know who Katerina Vick was?
No, I do know Walter Payton, but I don't know Katerina Vick.
She was from East Germany. She was an ice skater and
That might be conjuring up something. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, she won the Olympic gold medal for ice skating, and she was a beautiful young lady. And so Bob was doing a game in Berlin, in West Berlin,
Mm-hmm.
and they came to him and they said, Katerina Vick is going to toss the coin at the beginning. And Bob said, fine. So when they brought her to him, she took him by the arm and said, Bob, I have something to tell you. And he says, what's that? She said, when we go out on the field, everybody in the stands is going to whistle. And he says, in Europe, when they whistle, and that's the same as booing. So don't be surprised. And Bob says, well, don't worry about that. I've been booed in every stadium in the United States.
Oh, that's good. And these are the stories that you have in your book, things like what you're just telling us. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Oh, that's got to be a book to read for sure. I'm going to have to get that. So at 91 years old, still writing and still sharing these stories, when you picture the reader who most needs these stories, who are they and what do you hope they carry with them when they finish the last page?
You know, the first book I did was Swimming for Our Lives. And when I retired for the second time from doing marine conservation, all the magazines, I was pretty well known in the state of California for doing the initiative and conservation work. And so the magazines wanted my name in there. And I said, the stories I wrote were just terrible, garbage, but they didn't care. They just wanted my name in their magazine. So I had done lots of magazine articles. And I had a friend of mine that was the outdoor editor for the Augusta Chronicle newspaper. And I was complimenting him on a book. He'd done 2 or 3 books. And I said, that's really going to be a great book. And he said, well, Jimmy, you could do a book too. I said, oh, no way. I said, no way I could do a book. I said, I'm a terrible writer. And I said, I'm better at talking than writing. And he said, no, he said, you could do one. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you just take some of your magazine articles and put them together, and that's a book. I said, well, I'll go through my files. So I went through my files, and there might have been 4 or 5 that were decent enough you could fix it up and be in a book. The rest of them, no way. But I worked at it. He perked my interest, and I started. I found notes on other trips I'd had and things, and I put together about 21 or 22 stories for the book, and that's how that one came to be. I told him he tricked me into doing that first book, and I'll tell you a story. Do you know the singing group The Platters?
Yes.
Well,
I don't remember what their songs were right now, but I'm a music fanatic, so I do know The Platters.
Only You. That's my favorite song.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, we went to Branson, Missouri, and my wife's roommate and her husband lived in Texas. We flew there to Springfield from Southern California and rented a car and went over, and they drove 2 days up from Houston to join us. And we had gone to shows, and the shows there were terrific. I mean, really, really world-class, like Las Vegas type shows, and really good. And we had a good time. So we decided on Friday that we were going to be leaving on Saturday morning, that we had to maybe go to an afternoon show, then go get dinner, and then go back to the room and pack up, because they were going to take what we had left over with them, and we were going to fly back to California. So with that plan, we went to the Cracker Barrel for dinner. And after dinner, John and I went out on the porch and sat in the rocking chairs, and the wives went around the gift shop in there. And 2 guys came out the door. And as they came out, I heard them say, why don't we play a game of checkers? And so I stood up. I said, there's a checker board right here. You can take my chair. And I said, wait a minute. How are you going to play checkers with him? He's got a white cane with a red tap. Yeah, I got to referee this match. This isn't going to be fair. So we got going back and forth like that. And about that time, my wife's roommate came out, Nancy, and she said, you know who these guys are? I said, I don't have a clue. She says, they are the Platters. I said, oh, wow. I love that group. I love dancing to their music. It was just terrific. And so anyway, we talked a little bit. He said, have you been to our show? I said, no. I said, we haven't had a chance to. He said, well, you got to come tonight. I said, no, we got to go back and pack. We got to leave early in the morning. He said, no, you got to come to the show. Anyway, we finally says, okay, we'll come to the show. He said, well, give me 15 minutes and I'll go make arrangements at will call. So we wait a while and we go and will call. And in Branson, the ushers seat you because they can get everybody. They seat theaters, they seat thousands of people. So there could be chaos when people try to figure out where they sit. So they have ushers to show you where to sit. So we got our tickets and we gave them to the usher and we started going down front. And we were at the very front seats. There was nothing in front of us, just the stage.
That's so nice of them.
So anyway, the show was terrific, and the music was incredible. And at the end of the show, Rooster, who was the leader of the group, and the one I'd been talking with, he was bass in the group, and Rooster came down off the stage with 2 long stem red roses. He gave one to my wife, Pat, and one to Nancy. And he danced with Pat in the aisle there in front of the stage. And then he went back up on the stage and they finished the last number and invited everybody to come up to the lobby to get signatures and take photographs and everything. And I'm thinking, we're in the front row. It'd take us 30, 45 minutes just to get to the door. I said, there's no way. I said, look, there's an exit door right over next to the stage, and there's not a guard there. Why don't we go out that door? So we went
right into their dressing room.
So we went out that door, and as soon as we get out, I hear this voice, where are you going? Here comes Brewster up the sidewalk. He was going up to the front. And he said, I said, Mister, we got to go pack. He said, no, you come up front. He said, no. I said, the line's going to be a mile long. He said, don't worry about the line. And he took Pat by the arm and they went up the sidewalk. So I told John, I said, I guess we're going up front. So we went up front and took some pictures and got autographs. And it was one of those unusual events in life. And so I made that into an article for the book, but I had some things like that. But that was kind of fun. But I learned from that book.
What are you telling people though? I'm asking, what should they take away from it? I mean, are you telling them enjoy life or just? I think
there are a couple of things. I think it's educational. I think it can be inspirational. And I think it can be entertaining, historical, and educational. So I think you get all of those things out of a book. If it's a good book and it's historical in nature, then you get those things. And my books have all had some things of historical nature. One of the things, when I was 82 years old, I was invited to go to New London and give the remarks at the graduation ceremony at Submarine School, which was a great honor. My men asked me to go and represent them there for the ceremony. And so I got to go and talk to all those young guys and give them some thoughts for the future. And that's where I got to thinking a lot about relationships. And I talked to them about relationships with their shipmates, with their spouses, with their neighbors, with everyone. I said, relationships are the most important thing in the world. I said, if you have a good relationship with everyone, you're going to have a wonderful life. And that kind of started me off thinking about relationships. And Did you see the movie City Slickers with Billy Crystal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you remember when Jack Palance had that big old knife, and they were convinced he was going to cut their throats. And one
Oh, he was a
day,
scary guy anyway.
yeah,
He knew how to be scary.
one day he said, "We're going to go out and round up straight." And Billy Crystal said, "Oh, he's going to cut my throat. He's going to take me out there and kill me." But as they were riding out, Jack Palance turned around in the saddle and he says, "There's only one thing." And Billy Crystal says, "Your finger?" And when I did that in sub school, they all laughed, of course. And I said, Palance told him, "That's for you to figure out." I said, "Well, it's not for me to figure out. I'll tell you what it is. It's relationships." And that's when I talked to him about relationships. And then when I got through the remarks, the commanding officer of submarine school gave some remarks, and then they said, "You go stand over there. You're going to give out all the certificates and shake hands with everybody." And I got every sailor. They were all standing at attention, of course. And I said, "I'm going to make every one of them smile." I said, "They're just too formal." And so I shake their head, give them a certificate, and say something to them, and got them all smiling. And it was such a wonderful, wonderful experience to do that. And then after the ceremony, we went back and had lunch with the chiefs in their mess hall.
That's wonderful.
And I put
well,
that
it's got it. We're getting to the time when I want to play Two Truths and a Lie, our signature game on Project Candor. So, are you ready to play?
Oh, sure.
Okay, great. So for those listening, the rules of the game is that our guest, Jim, has provided us with 3 headlines from his life. Ones that he hasn't really talked about yet, but that 2 of them are true and 1 of them is a lie or a twisted truth or just exaggeration maybe. But I'm going to read out those headlines. Then I get to guess which one I think is the lie. And then we'll turn it over to Jim to talk about these 3 stories. And then in the end, he'll tell us which one's the lie. So I'm going to display my screen and show the stories. This episode is sponsored by Rebel 180, the home of brave pivots and fresh starts. Rebel 180 is all about helping you rediscover what's possible when you stop settling and start listening to that little tug inside that says, life can be different. Whether you're navigating a career shift, dreaming about a new direction, or standing at the crossroads wondering if it's time for your own 180-degree turn, Rebel 180 is a reminder you don't need permission to change your story. And now, as we open the door to our second sponsor, we're stepping into the world of tech. Simple Socket Print, the lightweight, blazing fast label print solution designed for those who need reliability without the bloat. With version 1.5, you get instant printing in milliseconds, fully maintained print sequence, and automatic base 64 decoding, all without needing print driver installs. If you're running SQL Server 2016 or newer, Simple Socket Print 1.5 drops right in and gets to work. Keep your workflow simple. Keep your label printing fast with Simple Socket Print. Thank you to our sponsors. So the number 1 story here, Jim, Jim shares a love story that's hard to top. Nearly 60 years of marriage to his wife, Pat. Number 2 story is one of Jim's classmates at Annapolis ended up in jail, and Jim recorded the surprisingly funny and heartfelt story behind it. Number 3 is Jim recounts his connection to Apollo 16, including 3 days on the moon and an Olympic-level achievement. So, shoot, I don't know. You've done so much stuff. It's hard to say none of these, but the number 2 one is about your Annapolis friend up in jail. So I'm going to guess that's a lie because that would be hard to think somebody was an officer and ended up in jail. No, I guess it's not too hard of a stretch. But anyway, I'll guess that one's a lie. So you go through each of those stories, please, starting with number 1 and your love story with Pat.
All right. Okay. Well, my second year at Annapolis, my Georgia girlfriend, I could not get her to come up to, and she said, our relationship is not much. She says, I see you a few days at Christmas and a few days in summer, but you only get 30 days leave in summertime, so it's not much of a relationship. So she called that off. And so a classmate said he was going over to the University of Delaware for 3 days and would I like to go? And I said, I'd love to go. And his girlfriend at the time, Sheila Cunningham, fixed me up with 3 blind dates. And I'm sure the first 2 were fine, but number 3 was amazing. I had never met anyone like Patricia Ann Metzler. And you had to understand that when I was a sophomore in high school, I had a steady girlfriend. I always had girlfriends. I had a lot of girlfriends over the years. I had one that told me, I had one that told me, she said, I'm not waiting around 4 years to get out of Annapolis. She said, I'm going to Georgia and find me a husband. And I said, okay. But anyway, when I met Pat, she had a charisma about her that seemed to reach out 4 or 5 feet. It was amazing. And I didn't know anything about her background, just that we talked. And I just was so comfortable talking to her. I said, she is just an amazing person. And I said, I have got to get to know her better because this might be the person that I want to marry someday. So I got a phone number and address and everything. And I went back to Annapolis and I tried to get her to come to Annapolis for a weekend. And she wasn't interested in doing it. She did not see being married into a military life. That was not something she had pictured for herself. And I didn't know it at the time, but she was studying elementary education and she wanted to teach and she wanted to be a coach. She was going to coach kids in sports. And I didn't know that's what she wanted to do. And I also didn't know that she had just broken up with the captain of the Delaware basketball team. And years later, I found out that she was the most popular girl on the campus. And so I didn't know what I was fighting with all those things, but I was not going to give up. And I finally convinced her to come down for a formal dance. And Navy had the best dance bands in the country that came there and had that reputation. So they knew that it was going to be a fabulous dance. And so she agreed to come down. And we said we would meet on the steps of Bancroft Hall at 2:00 on Saturday afternoon, which gave her time to get there on a train and get a bus over from Baltimore to Annapolis. And so when I went to the steps, there she was sitting on the steps, and I wasn't sure how I was going to recognize her, and she was not sure how she'd recognize me, but she had on a sweatshirt that had Delaware right across the front. I looked at her and I smiled and she smiled back. And I think maybe our souls met when we smiled at each other because there was not an awkward moment ever in our relationship. It was always like we'd known one another for many years. And, and so we hit it off from the very beginning. And it was kind of like the Platters Group, where the Platters Group glommed on the Pat. And on our honeymoon, after a honeymoon, we went out from Brunswick to San Diego, and we stopped in Las Vegas. And that was before the Strip. But we didn't know anything about gambling, and I'd heard of the Golden Nugget, so we went there, and it was all lights and noise and full of activity. And so we went over to the craps table and was standing there. And a guy at the table started to have a conversation with Pat. And next thing you know, he wanted her to hold all his money. And next thing you know, he and the croupier are arguing, and it's his turn to throw the dice. And finally, he threw the dice and was going to leave. And I said, "Wait, your money's no, you keep it. You keep it." He said, "I just lose it all." And he said, "Just don't get out of here. Don't stay here." And
oh wow.
And so, but people just glommed onto her. And if we went out to dinner in a nice restaurant in California, people thought she was a movie star. They weren't sure who she was, but she looked a little bit like Doris Day or Elizabeth Montgomery, the two people that they used to think she was all the time. But she was attractive, and but she was just like the girl next door. You'd never know that she was as attractive as she was because she was so nice, and she was always president of just about every organization because everybody wanted her to be president. Not that she wanted to be, but that was just her coming, I guess. Whatever.
Well, that is lovely. We got to keep moving because we're going to run out of time here soon. But number 2, can you tell us about your classmate in Annapolis?
Yeah. Okay. George Phillips was the skipper of an ocean-going tugboat. And they got an assignment to pick up a destroyer in the reserve fleet in Philadelphia and tow it around Florida to Texas, to Houston. So they got it hooked up and towing behind them, and they got out into the Atlantic Ocean, and it was very rough. And they got the word that there was a hurricane brewing down by Florida. So they decided we better not get caught out in a hurricane with this big destroyer behind us because that would be very hazardous. So they pulled into Port Angeles, which is now Fort Lauderdale, and to wait out the storm. But before they got in, George came down with severe abdominal pains, and the hospital corpsman on board, who was a doctor, said, you have appendicitis. And then when you get in, you have to go directly to the hospital. So when they got tied up, the paramedics were up there on the dock waiting for him and they came down and they got George on the gurney. And so the captain is going up the ramp and going to the hospital. Well, when he got to the hospital, it turned out it was gastroenteritis and not appendicitis. And so they treated him and let him come back to the boat the next morning. So when he got there, everybody's waiting for him. Skipper, we're in the best Liberty port in the United States. We're going to be here a few days. We have not been paid for 2 weeks. No one has any money. We can't go ashore and have a good time with no money. But we found out if you take our pay records down to the Coast Guard station in Miami, they will give you cash. You can come back and pay all of us. We can all go ashore and have a good time while we wait out the storm. And we have a pickup truck for you. So George gets in the pickup truck with the pay records and he heads south on Highway A1A. The ocean's on the left and the strip mall's on the right. Well, somebody pulled out of a strip mall without looking, and he veered to the left to keep from T-boning them, and he scraped all the way down the side of another car. So they pull over, and the other driver is mad as heck because his brand new car is all scraped up, and they called the police, and the police came and gave George a ticket. And he said, I'm taking your driver's license because I can't depend on you showing up in court. But if you show up in court in Miami at 2:00 this afternoon, we'll give you your license back. So at 2:00, George gets to court, and the judge is very ornery. He said half the cases were Hispanic, and the judge was bilingual, and he was tough as nails. So they called his name, and George stood up, and the clerk read the charges. And the judge says, how do you plead? And George says, not guilty. And the judge said, $25. And George said, let me explain. The judge said, $25. And the judge says, take him away, bailiff. So the bailiff takes George by the arm and takes George and locks him up. So now the skipper's locked up. But he saw there was a telephone on the wall, and he called the boat, and he got his executive officer, who was a Lieutenant JG, and he said, they got me locked up down here in Miami. Bring $25 down here and get me out. He said, sir, I don't have $25. He said, well, pass the damn hat. There's got to be $25 on the boat. So a couple hours later, the executive officer showed up, but he's got Bosun Bean with him, who was a warrant officer. And so George looks at Bosun Bean and said, what are you doing here all dressed up in blues like you're ready for inspection? He said, well, sir, I've never had the opportunity to bail the skipper out, and I wasn't going to miss this opportunity. So, and about that time, the judge came out of the courtroom, and he saw this group out in the hall, and he and Bosun Bean started looking at each other, And all of a sudden, they ran together and started jumping up and down, clapping each other on the back and everything. And it turned out they were best friends from New Jersey. They had joined the Navy together, and they were in Pearl Harbor on a battleship in a 40 millimeter mount. A bomb came down and blew both of them over the side, and each thought the other had been dead for 24 years. So at that point, the judge looked at George and he said, okay, $5 court case. So they paid the $5 and went back to the tugboat.
Oh, that's nice.
So when George got there, he went to his room and he got on the phone and he called his wife. Honey, sit down. I have something to tell you. In the last 2 days, I've been in and out of the hospital and in and out of jail, and that's all I have to say.
Okay. All right, number 3. Let's go to that one. You recount your connection to Apollo 16, including 3 days on the moon and an Olympic level achievement.
Well, I was scheduled to be a backup for Apollo 13. And you remember the movie Apollo 13. Mm-hmm. And but I got the measles and I was not allowed to go. And so I was programmed to go on Apollo 16, and we had the liftoff from Cape Canaveral, and we had a little bit of trouble with navigation on the way there, but we worked our way out of it, and we got out of the orbiter, it got into the lander, 2 of us, and we landed on the moon, and it was a perfect landing. It worked out great. Now we had one thing on this lander that had never been on the moon before, and we had a rover. So it was an electric vehicle that was just basically 4 wheels and 2 seats, and so that we could get as far as 4 miles away from the lander, because if it broke down, that was the most we could walk with those heavy backpacks with the air conditioning and the oxygen generators on our backs. But it never did break down. And so my other astronaut drove, and I was on the mic talking to NASA and photographing what we were seeing and doing all the reporting. And so this went on for 3 days, and we did got a lot of samples and got a lot of video and a lot of comments on what we were seeing. And so that was the story of our 3 days on the moon. Now, when we left the moon, and we got ready to hook up again with the orbiter, and we opened the hatch, dust started coming up because we had dust from our uniforms and everything. And he shut it down and he said, here's a vacuum. You're not coming up here until you get rid of all that dust. So they gave us a vacuum, and we vacuumed everything up, and then we could get back in the orbiter with all of the samples of rocks that we had and head back for Earth. And it was a very smooth landing. We landed in the Atlantic, and the helicopter picked us up. We got back to the aircraft carrier, and it was a very worthwhile journey. And that was a real fun trip for me. I enjoyed it.
Wow. So those are your 3 stories. So I guess that 2 was a lie. Can you tell us which one's the lie?
Number 3.
But you told it so well. I thought you were right there.
That was Charlie Duke's story. Charlie Duke was Apollo 16, and he went to the moon. And I'll tell you what, Charlie, when Charlie called me and he said, Jimmy, he says, I don't want to write my story. He said, I want you to write it. He said, I want you to interview me and you write it. I said, okay. So I asked my 31-year-old granddaughter, Melanie Johnson, to come over. She had a photographic memory. And I said, both of us will take a set of notes. And that way we don't miss anything. And then I'll take those 2 sets of notes, and then I'll write the story. So that's what we did. And I wrote the story, sent it back to Charlie, and Charlie embellished it some. And that was so much fun because I got to do that one with my granddaughter.
Oh, yeah, that's fantastic. Well, this has been so much fun, Jim. I want to tell the viewers there's the way that they can get in touch with you. So I'm going to scroll to the next page here because I know they're going to want to connect with you. And you have a quote here that I think is really great. I'm going to read it. I am fearless, willing to take on any project and get it done. I've lived my whole life, 92 years old, whether I knew it or not. So I think that's a great quote. You've done a lot of things. And I think I was adding another one because I don't think you really talked about being a fisherman too much, but you talked about the marine conservation, but you also were a fisherman. You knew a lot about that as well.
Fishing has been my passion in life since I was a little boy. And I had a fishing rod that I took on the submarine. I didn't have a place to store it, so I had it in my bunk. I slept with my rod and reel.
That's cute. That's very cute. So Jim has given you some contact information here, his website, his Facebook page, and the call to action is take a look at the link that's here to get a copy of Shaking Up the World. I think you'll really enjoy it. I mean, Jim, you've been a fantastic guest on Project Candor. I'm so happy that you joined us today. And for those listening, I hope you'll join us back next week for another outstanding guest. And until then, from your Admiral of the Unexpected, I wish you smooth sailing. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me on Project Candor, where the doors are open, the stories are unexpected, and the treasure is always real. If today's episode made you laugh or think, follow the show and share it with your crew. Otherwise, I might just make you swab the deck. I'm Jeanne Anderson, your Admiral of the Unexpected. See you on the next voyage.